The village lay hidden between mountains and forest, a place untouched by roads, time, or curiosity. Fog arrived every morning as if summoned, wrapping the houses in silence. People here slept deeply, but they did not dream. Children were taught early that dreams were useless things, fantasies, distractions. The elders said dreams weakened the mind, made people unstable. Over generations, the villagers learned how to sleep without imagining. At the edge of the village sat the black lake. Its surface was smooth, darker than night, reflecting nothing, not the sky, not the trees, not even the moon. No birds flew over it. No fish stirred beneath it. Parents warned their children, never look into the lake for too long, because something beneath it was always looking back. The first dream came to a man named Elias. He had lived 40 years without a single dream until that night. In his sleep, he stood waist-deep in the black lake. The water was freezing, heavy, pressing against his body like memory. Beneath the surface, whispers echoed, not words, but emotions, regret, grief, rage. Something moved below him. Fast, slow, watching. Elias woke gasping for air, his heart pounding. Yet as terror faded, a strange calm replaced it, a relief he could not explain. That morning he smiled more than usual, and no one noticed that his eyes looked deeper. Within days, others began dreaming. Different people, different houses, same lake. Each dream carried the same details: the cold water, the pressure, the whispers, the presence below. None of them had spoken of it aloud, yet when they finally did, their descriptions matched perfectly. The villagers grew uneasy. Dreams were not supposed to return. Dreams belonged to the past. What frightened them most was not the similarity of the dreams, but the certainty that the dreams were not personal. They felt shared, as if something ancient had awakened in all of them at once. Soon a symbol appeared, a perfect circle divided by a dark vertical line, submerged beneath rippling water. No one knew what it meant, yet everyone felt it. Some carved it absent-mindedly into wood. Others drew it in the dirt without realizing why. An old librarian found the symbol in a forgotten book. No explanation, no name. Just the shape. The symbol felt older than language, older than the village, as if it had been waiting to be remembered. A traveling psychologist arrived after hearing rumors of shared dreams. He believed in logic, patterns, reason. At first, he dismissed the stories as coincidence until he interviewed the villagers. Every dream followed the same structure, the same emotional weight. That night, he dreamed too. He stood in the black lake, and for the first time in his life, he felt his rational mind fall silent. Drawn by curiosity or something deeper, the psychologist walked to the lake after sunset. The air was heavy, the water unmoving. As he stared into it, he heard his own voice whispering from below. Not speaking words, remembering feelings he had buried long ago. For the first time, he understood. The lake was not water. It was a mind. Dreams began leaking into waking life. Wet footprints appeared in houses. Villagers woke coughing black water. One woman spoke in a voice not her own while asleep, confessing truths she had never dared say. The unconscious was no longer content with dreams. It wanted to be seen. An elderly woman finally spoke. Long ago, the village decided emotions were dangerous. Grief, anger, desire, they buried them. Dreams were forbidden. Children were punished for imagining. The Black Lake became the place where feelings were thrown away. But nothing buried stays dead forever. Dreams turned violent. People faced versions of themselves filled with hatred and sorrow. Some villagers refused to sleep. Others slept endlessly, unable to wake. The shadow, ignored for generations, demanded recognition. One night, the village walked together to the lake, sleeping. They stood at the shore in silence. The water rippled for the first time in decades. Something beneath the surface was rising. The psychologist stepped into the lake, awake. Beneath the surface were memories, emotions, faces long forgotten. The symbol completed itself. The village's grief finally had a voice. By morning, the village woke changed. People cried, laughed, remembered. Dreams returned, but no longer ruled them. The lake was calm again. The psychologist left the village behind. The lake remained, dark, silent, alive. And beneath its surface, dreams waited patiently. Morning came, but it felt unfamiliar. The sun rose over the village, yet its light seemed hesitant, thin, uncertain, as if the world itself was adjusting to something newly changed. Villagers woke exhausted, eyes red from crying, throats raw from screaming words they did not remember saying. Some felt lighter. Others felt hollow, as if something had been removed but not yet replaced. Dreams continued that night, but now they were different. They no longer pulled the dreamers into the lake. They showed paths. The lake stopped appearing in every dream. Instead, villagers dreamed of doors, staircases, mirrors, forests, and fires. Each dream felt personal, tailored. The unconscious was no longer shouting. It was teaching. The psychologist recognized the shift immediately. This was no longer collapse. This was individuation. Not everyone welcomed the change. Some villagers feared the dreams. They drank to avoid sleep. They tied bells to their wrists to wake themselves when dreams began. But resistance had consequences. The more they avoided dreaming, the more fragmented they became, angry without reason, empty without cause. The unconscious does not disappear when ignored. It rots. Archetypes began appearing across dreams. The child weeping beneath a tree, the old wise man standing at crossroads, the mother both nurturing and devouring, the shadow no longer monstrous, just honest. These were not hallucinations. They were structures older than the village itself. The psychologist understood. The collective unconscious had not only awakened, it was educating. One night the lake returned to the dreams, but differently. It no longer pulled people under. It spoke only one message again and again: I am not your enemy. The water reflected faces now. Not perfect ones, true ones. The lake was not darkness. It was depth. The psychologist dreamed deeper than anyone. He stood before a mirror that showed not his face, but every version of himself he had ever rejected. Coward, arrogant man, frightened child. He did not turn away. For the first time he accepted them all, and the mirror shattered into light. Life in the village changed quietly. People spoke more honestly. Children were encouraged to dream and draw what they saw. The lake was no longer forbidden. They built a path leading to its edge, not to worship it, but to remember. This will not end, he said. The unconscious is not something you conquer. It is something you listen to. If you silence it again, the lake will return. They understood. Some truths only need to awaken once. Years later, travelers reported strange dreams miles away from the village. Dreams of water, of mirrors, of something patient beneath the surface. The Black Lake had never been confined to one place. It was inside everyone, and it always had been. Years passed. The village faded into rumor, then into legend, but the dreams did not remain contained. Travelers spoke of similar images: black water, impossible stillness, mirrors beneath the surface. They came from different countries, different cultures, different languages, yet the dreams carried the same emotional weight. The psychologist read these accounts in distant cities and felt a familiar chill. The lake had found new shores. Researchers attempted to map the phenomenon. They failed. The dreams followed no geography, no political boundaries, no logic. Instead, they appeared where repression was deepest, where grief was unspoken, where emotions were buried beneath routine. The unconscious, it seemed, chose its own battlegrounds. Anthropologists noticed something disturbing. Ancient myths, long dismissed as superstition, were resurfacing in dreams. Flood myths, underworld descents, sacred waters that tested the soul. Civilizations across history had told the same story in different words. The Black Lake was not new. It was remembered. The psychologist understood too late. The village had not awakened the lake. They had merely stopped resisting it. The unconscious had always been there, patient, silent, waiting for humanity to mature enough to listen. The lake was not punishment. It was initiation. Across the world, people began confronting themselves. Dreams forced honesty. Shadows appeared not as monsters, but as neglected truths. Those who integrated them grew calmer, more whole. Those who resisted fractured. Societies changed, not loudly but internally. Not everyone survived the descent. Some lost themselves in the depths, mistaking the unconscious for escape rather than integration. They chased dreams endlessly, refusing reality. The lake gives wisdom, but only to those who return. Depth without grounding becomes madness. Quietly, new rituals emerged. People wrote down dreams, shared them, listened instead of dismissing. No religion formed. No doctrine. Only attention. The unconscious does not demand worship, only acknowledgement. On his final night, the psychologist dreamed of the lake one last time. It was endless now, stretching beyond horizon and sky. No fear, no pull, only reflection. He woke knowing the truth. The Black Lake was never a place. It was the depth each human must one day face. And beneath it was not darkness, but the self. At first the changes were subtle. Not revolutions, not declarations. People began pausing before speaking. Nations hesitated before acting. There was a strange, collective slowing, as if humanity had begun to feel the weight of its own inner life. Dreams no longer felt like private illusions. They felt instructive. For the first time in history, humanity sensed that its greatest threat did not come from outside, but from what it refused to see within. People who had never heard of the village dreamed of a lake. But there was no water. Instead, there was depth, an endless descent into the self. Some described falling without fear. Others described standing at the edge, unable to step forward. The form changed. The meaning remained. The unconscious adapts to those who approach it. Long-held myths began to crumble. The myth of constant progress, the myth of endless growth, the myth that reason alone could save humanity. People realized they had built civilizations on repression, rewarding productivity while punishing reflection, celebrating strength while denying vulnerability. The Black Lake did not destroy these illusions. It exposed their emptiness. A quiet shift occurred. Blame lost its power. Victimhood became uncomfortable. People began asking a different question. What am I contributing to the darkness? The shadow was no longer projected outward. It was faced inward. This did not make humanity perfect. It made it honest. Children born during this era dreamed vividly. They spoke of symbols without being taught, drew mandalas instinctively, asked questions adults feared. They were not wiser. They were simply less divided. The unconscious was no longer a stranger to them. The psychologist wrote one final book. It contained no theories, no instructions, only a warning. If humanity refuses the inner journey, it will repeat its outer catastrophes forever. He did not publish it widely. Those who needed it would find it. The unconscious always knows its audience. Generations later, humanity faced another crisis. This time the response was different. Instead of denial, there was reflection. Instead of panicked dissent, people turned inward not to escape reality, but to understand it. The Black Lake deepened again. The lake no longer frightened anyone. It taught through symbols, not commands. Through dreams, not disasters. Humanity learned the rhythm of descent and return, to dive without drowning, to face darkness without becoming it. Individuation became cultural. In their deepest dreams, some saw the lake reflected in the stars. The unconscious was not separate from the universe. It was an echo of it. As above, so below. As within, so without. Humanity was not alone in its depth. There will never be a final awakening, no permanent enlightenment, no end to descent. The Black Lake does not vanish. It evolves. And as long as humans dream, it will remain. Patient, silent, infinite, waiting not to be conquered, but to be known. For centuries, humanity had feared silence. It filled every moment with sound, distraction, urgency. Noise was protection from guilt, from grief, from the questions that waited underneath. But something changed. Silence returned not as emptiness but as presence. People sat without reaching for answers. They listened without demanding conclusions. The unconscious no longer needed to shout. It was finally being heard. Dreams became less dramatic, more precise. They no longer overwhelmed. They reminded. A forgotten promise, an ungrieved loss, a neglected truth. Dreams became the soul's memory, not of facts but of meaning. The Black Lake appeared rarely now, but when it did, it was clear. No institutions were formed, no authorities appointed. Yet across the world, some people naturally became listeners. They did not interpret dreams. They held space for them. These keepers understood something ancient. Meaning cannot be forced, it must be received. They spoke rarely, and when they did, people listened. There remained one fear humanity struggled to face. Not death, not suffering, but insignificance. The fear that all this depth, all this inner work meant nothing in a vast universe. The Black Lake answered not with reassurance, but with reflection. Meaning was never guaranteed. It was created through relationship. As generations passed, something remarkable happened. History stopped repeating itself so violently. Patterns were noticed sooner. Warnings were taken seriously. The unconscious, once ignored, had always shaped time from below. Now it shaped it consciously. Humanity learned that time does not heal wounds. Attention does. The Black Lake did not offer salvation. It offered responsibility. It taught one final truth. Wholeness is not purity. It is inclusion. Light without darkness is blindness. Depth without surface is loss. To be human is to hold contradiction and remain present. In old age, many noticed their dreams fading, not disappearing, settling, as if the unconscious said, "You have listened enough." There was no fear in this silence, only gratitude. The lake does not need to appear when it has been integrated. Future generations would not speak of Jung, or psychology, or the Black Lake. They would simply live differently. Less divided, less compelled to dominate, more capable of reflection. The deepest revolutions leave no monuments. One child, long after the lake was forgotten, dreamed of standing at its edge. There was no fear, no instruction, only a sense of recognition. The child woke smiling. Beneath every thought, every fear, every dream, the Black Lake remains, not as darkness, but as depth. And it waits not for humanity to change, but to remember who it has always been. A generation was born that never heard the name Black Lake. No warnings, no legends, no rituals. And yet, they lived differently. They paused more often. They listened without being taught how. They sensed when something inside them needed attention. The lake had vanished from language, but not from structure. Something curious happened to memory. People no longer remembered events as rigid narratives. They remembered meaning, a conversation without recalling the words, a loss remembered as tenderness instead of pain, a conflict remembered as growth rather than victory. History softened not by forgetting, but by integration. Children were no longer taught what to think about themselves. They were taught how to notice. Notice tightness in the body. Notice recurring dreams. Notice the feeling beneath anger. No one called it psychology. It was simply care. The unconscious did not need a name to be honored. Disagreements still happened, sometimes fiercely, but escalation slowed. People asked not only what was wrong, but what was being protected. Anger revealed fear. Stubbornness revealed grief. Silence revealed overload. Conflict became translation, not war. Art changed. It no longer shocked for attention, no longer screamed for meaning. It gestured. Paintings felt like dreams you almost remembered. Music felt like something unfolding rather than performing. Stories ended without resolution and felt complete. The unconscious spoke fluently again. Though unseen, the Black Lake lived on as rhythm, in cycles of rest and action, in the natural return of emotion after suppression, in the shared understanding that depth required descent and return. People no longer feared going inward. They trusted they would come back. An old woman once sat by a body of water with her grandchild. The child asked, "Why do people feel so much?" The woman smiled and said only, "Because we're meant to." She did not mention lakes, or dreams, or history. Nothing more was needed. At times, humanity drifted toward forgetting again. Speed increased, distraction tempted, surface glittered, and when imbalance grew too strong, dreams returned. Not dramatically, but insistently. The lake did not punish. It reminded. What was learned became clear. The unconscious does not withdraw when ignored. It waits. It does not demand obedience. It responds to attention. Whether named or forgotten, it remains the ground of experience, always available, always deep. No one tells this story anymore. And yet, in every pause before reaction, in every honest confrontation with oneself, in every dream that gently nudges rather than overwhelms, the Black Lake flows on, not beneath humanity, but within it. And now, as the lake grows still, as the village fades back into silence, there is one final truth to face. The unconscious never belonged only to them. Every shadow you've witnessed, every symbol that stirred something familiar, every unease you couldn't quite explain, that was not the story. That was you. Carl Jung believed that what we refuse to face does not disappear. It waits, it dreams, and it returns through symbols. If something in this journey unsettled you, if it lingered longer than comfort allows, then the work has already begun. The shadow has been seen, and what is seen can be integrated. If you wish to continue this descent into the unconscious, into myth, into the psychology that shapes every human life, then stay with this channel. Like this video, not for the algorithm, but as a mark of recognition. Subscribe, so the next dream finds you. Because the lake never stops dreaming, and neither do you.